And we're live. Welcome to the Rican show. And this is episode 29 with Stephanie. She has the channel of Teaching Liberty. And I put her link tree in the description. So if you want to check her out, if you enjoyed today's content, and please don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this channel and share the content with others. And Stephanie, my daughter does that to me. That's why I have her
Yeah,
upstairs.
right when we first.
I know how that feels. That's why
Yeah.
I got my wife upstairs with my daughter, so like that she doesn't.
Say hello.
Hello, I'm reading Harry Potter.
Okay, have a
Oh,
good night.
enjoy Harry Potter. I love that. I love that series
So
and
yes,
her
of course, right when
and the
we
writer.
yeah, no, we're going through it right now and reading it. As we were talking before, I homeschool, so it's something that we do every night, and then even sometimes during the day, we'll be like, "Oh, let's get in a couple pages." And we actually were trying to watch the movie last night, but we fell asleep. But I
Oh,
appreciate the intro, Stephanie Edmonds, as you were saying, teaching liberty, and thank you, Carlos, for having me on.
oh well, no, thank you for coming on. So, well, since you know what, since we already went there about the homeschooling, so since you homeschool, um, what drove you to homeschool? So we could get into your background.
Yeah, so I my son actually went to public school last year for kindergarten, so this would technically be his first grade year. But during his kindergarten year, I went through a transition out of being a public school teacher because in New York City they had vaccine mandates. So in it was, I guess, October 4th, I believe was the date. My last day, October 4th, 2021.
Mm.
uh, New York City's vaccine mandate for teachers went into effect, and then eventually it spread out to all city workers and also private sector workers. And that's something that I did not feel comported with my religious beliefs, and so I didn't do it, and I was put on unpaid leave and then eventually fired. And so in that transition, my son at that time, he was in a mask at school and they had all sorts of crazy restrictions. They weren't eating lunch in the cafeteria. They had plastic shields. And so I was also advocating for all those things to get taken down. And then I realized that all of those things were just the outward facing symbols, you could say, of all the nonsense that was going on in terms of um, curriculum basically not having any, in terms of the crazy, outrageous, uh, what's it called, salaries at the top, while they can't get paras because they pay them $22,000 a year,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Oh,
just a
I
lot
know
of,
that. I have
and
a special needs son, so like at the IEP, I'm there trying to get a one-on-one for him, and they're like, "Well, let's try to see how he does without the one-on-one first. Let's gather some data." And I'm like, "Yes, you guys just don't want to pay someone to be his one-on-one. I get it."
right. It's that yeah, I'm also doing some work actually um helping out some special education parents with their cases right now. So, it's really ugly to say the least.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
but basically throughout my transition professionally and having a little taste of the public education system as a parent, because these are actually the schools that I went to growing up. So I went through them through ninth grade, and my sisters actually both graduated from here. And I decided instead of going back to the system, because at some point I could have gotten a teaching job somewhere
Yeah.
else, and now I could technically get a teaching job in New York City since they dropped the mandate. But I said I'm not running back to the system. I decided that I'm gonna, instead of building my life around the public school system, I'm gonna build my life around the schooling that I design for my son and gonna build my work schedule around that. And I'm what, a year and a half, not quite, almost a year
Uh-huh.
and a half in.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm here. I'm paying my
Uh-huh.
bills.
Yeah. No, that's and that's great. That's why I say if parents can manage to do it, I, I mean, I see so many parents who do it. Like I have friends of mine. I used to live in Texas, so I know people in Texas that do it. I know locally where I live, there's a big pod that does it. I think even my church talked about they have their own pod that does it too. So it's out there. If the resources are out there where you don't have to feel stuck in the system that you don't uh you know whether you don't like what they're teaching, whether it's their values, or you feel the education is short. I think if don't let fear stop you from doing it.
And I mean, at some point you do just have to kind of take the leap. I remember for me, first of all, my parents thought I was crazy, right? My parents were like, "Are you sure?" You know? And I have a co-parenting situation, so I had to, work that out. And so it was the springtime and I'm like, "Oh, what are we doing?" So I took the initiative to put together a meeting. I used the networks I had in some parent groups and I put out a flyer and I said, "If you're interested in homeschooling, come to this location at this time." And like 20 or 25 people showed up and
Wow.
yeah, and we talked about it. I had somebody who already homeschooled come in and talked about what she did. And then from there, we just throughout the spring and into the summer, I was in different chat groups and we were just talking, what are people doing? And there was a couple co-ops that developed, but those were kind of parent led and you had to be there. And I definitely wanted something where I could at least have more of a drop off situation at least some of the time. And so I wanted to find other parents who wanted to work out something where we could like rotate or work together to get somebody to watch the kids for a certain period of time, because
Yeah.
I do work full time. And so just from having a lot of conversations and talking to a lot of different people and everywhere I go being like, "Oh, this is what I'm doing and what are you doing?" And it came together and I found a really good group of people who wanted the same things as me and who had the same goals, and we put together our program and found the right person to help us deliver it and put together our schedules so that we can rotate and make sure that everybody has a place to be, and
Mhm.
it's working out really, really well.
Now, what would you say some of the like curriculum um you objected to? Like, what's some of the stuff that pushed you to want to do this, other than, let's say, other than the
Yeah.
mask stuff? Why couldn't they get that out of my mouth?
That's okay. Nobody wants to talk about those. So there's a couple of layers to it, right? There's the stuff that everybody sees on the news about the uh critical race theory or the social emotional learning or
Hmm.
the transgender stuff. Like we have all of that right going on, and we can talk about that. But I would say the actual more concerning aspect, and what I think kind of is an open door for all of that stuff to come in, is the fact that our district here has 20% of the core classes have written curriculum. So 20% of the core classes have written curriculum. That means 80% of the core classes do not have core curriculum. And that teachers are more or less making things up. They're going on the internet, this and that. And then the kids aren't learning anything. And then they're like, "Oh, it's racist. So we have to bring in this stuff." And like, "Oh, we need, so
Yeah.
that's so that's actually my main concern, is getting high quality written curricula. That means that every day, more or less, a teacher should have a lesson plan. They don't need to go home and make it up and spend hours, because that's what teachers are doing. That's what teacher burnout is about, is that
Okay.
teachers are they have to write their lessons, whereas teachers used to have textbooks, right? And they just do kind of the next thing in the textbook and they give you the notes. And I mean, I graduated in 2008 and I was taking notes off of overhead projectors still. And then basically between when I graduated and now, there was the transition to more technology. The textbooks were, oh, you don't want to just be a textbook teacher. The kids have to be centered in the learning and like and all that stuff sounds nice. And I would even use some of that in the way that I would describe my vision of learning, which is like more
Mhm.
classical. The problem is that it just like when you do that, they take away the role of the teacher. They're like, "Oh, the teacher's supposed to be the facilitator," right? They're supposed to be the like the guide on the side, right? And like you need to have direct instruction. Like you need to have the value of a teacher
Mhm.
doing something for you, modeling it, right? And then you can definitely have the experiential stuff. But the kids aren't learning the basics because we've just thrown that all out of the bath, like thrown that thrown the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, I
And
think it's like what you were saying. It's like um, there. I think that that big problem you brought up the SELs, the social
yes,
emotional learning. I think that they're so focused on the emotional well-being of children, and I think that's what's the dangerous portion of when you're sending your kids to school, because that's not the school's job is to worry about their emotional well-being. That's my job, as the parent, is to,
right.
you know I
And
want
that's
them to
not to
go
say
there and learn math. I want them to learn science. I don't want them to um go there and uh like you said, with the social emotional learning and the CRT, because my kid's Puerto Rican. Does that mean they're a victim because they're Puerto Rican? Because they're I like, but they're passing because they have light skin like I do, except in the summer.
yeah, I mean, it definitely when you take away objective standards, right? We can talk about the standards. Like if you want to talk about what the standards should be, how they should be formed, sure, that's one conversation. But when we talk about basically getting rid of standards or having sliding standards, to me, that's racist,
I agree with
right?
you 100%.
Because or whatever, like maybe it's not racist, but it's some other bias, right? When you have objective standards, can bias enter into like, how you read those standards and apply those standards? Sure. But it's much easier for then somebody to be like, you know what, you're not applying those standards in this way because versus if you have these sliding standards and things are all over the place, a bias enters much more easily and in many more places. And then in return, you can't then be like, that's wrong in this way because there's no objective standard for you to make an argument from.
Well, look what's going on. I forget it. In California, there's some specialized schools, like they have in the well, since you're familiar with New York, like Brooklyn
Mhm.
Tech, Bronx
Yeah.
Science, Stuyvesant. You had a test, you take the test, and depending how you scored is depending which if you got into any of those schools. And I look at it, they canceled those tests in California, and I heard they're talking about canceling in New York because Asians were being overrepresented in these schools.
Yeah, that fight's been going on for a while. I believe it's the SHAT. It's like the high school version of the
Mhm.
SAT. And yeah, because certain races are underrepresented and certain ones are overrepresented, they've been called racist. I mean,
Which
again, we can talk about the test. Like, if you want to talk about the test and say, hey, these type of questions should be changed for this reason. We should change this language, this or that. I think that that's the more appropriate place for the conversation to be. But to get rid of the standard altogether just means that those people aren't capable of reaching any sort of objective standard. And again, to me, that is racist.
yeah, I
Uh,
mean, growing up, I was in the special progress classes. Those are the the advanced classes, so to speak. Like,
okay.
you so I heard, like, in New York, they're getting rid of them. And as
Yeah, they're
someone
doing
who
that a lot of places.
and to me, I'm like, so let's get this straight. you want to dumb down the smart kids because there's the other kids can't compete, can't keep up with them.
Right.
What's
Bringing the other kids up, which see, the thing is that it's hard, and they've been trying, so they say, for a long time, and so now they've just kind of given up, and they're just like, well, we're just gonna push the top down, or we're just gonna
yeah,
stop counting altogether, right? Or they change the type of data that they're collecting to the social emotional data, which, as you point out, I think is outside of their realm. Of course, you want school to be a welcoming place, right?
hmm
We're talking basic humanity here. We
hmm
want them to be loving, like teacher loving, like not weird loving, right? Like
well,
they're
I look at it like this. The problem, well, you look at it is before there's this push to equity because, and that's the whole thing. It's like people think equality, equity, they think it's the same thing, and it's not,
right,
because what you're doing is you want to make an equality of outcome, which anyone who's a parent, if you have more than one kid, that's pretty much impossible, because you could teach the kid, uh, each kid the same thing. You have three kids. One kid could be could grow up to be a doctor. One kid could be uh, an athlete, and the other kid could be a junkie. You don't. You taught them all the same. You gave them all the same love.
damn, you had to do the third one like that. You couldn't have just said like manager at Walmart at least, like damn.
Well, I was trying to make the extreme point. There's
Listen,
nothing.
sometimes there is a bad apple, right? Sometimes it's like, I do believe that it's not always parenting. Sometimes there just like is a bad apple in the
Oh,
bag.
I agree 100.
Um,
percent But that's the point of where equity misses the boat, because there is no, you can't guarantee these kids that are going to school an equal outcome. All
right.
you can do is give them
So
the same
here's
amount of
what I like
education.
to do with the equity stuff. Instead of arguing about the term or what one wants, I like to say, how does this actually do what you say? Right? How is this actually coming to the end result that you want? And I think that's a way more productive conversation to have, than arguing about like all these terms and the definitions and things like that. Oh, I saw this comment. I do
Yeah,
remember. Yeah.
I wanted to put that up because I thought that was funny, because I remember that as a kid.
Yeah. It was like, "Ooh, we can't touch that book." Yes. And
Yes.
or I remember I put this one up on my Instagram where it was like, you'd turn the page and it would be like drawn into the map of the United States would be like some guy with like his penis and like whatever. And I'd be like, remember when unwanted sexual images came from other students and not from your teachers? Can we
Right.
go back to that? Like when teachers got mad at that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Seriously. I
But
like that's one of the things I'm like, I as I have a 6-year-old, so I'm terrified of what's going to go on later on, because I like, once that stuff happens, then it will be, if I just then that might be when I make the push to do homeschooling, because um
no, but you can't wait. Here's like, I mean, whatever. Everybody has their own time and their own place, so I don't want to judge,
well, I
right?
just don't have the patience. Like right now, at the age that she's at, for her to learn to read.
Yes,
And I'm not a reading person. I'm a math
right.
person. Like if it comes to math, I could teach her math, but I
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
like,
in New York State, you can outsource up to 50% of their education. And I do believe in New York State, even if you don't go to public schools, you still qualify for special education services through the state. It varies from state to state. For example, in Connecticut, if you homeschool and don't go to public school, you do not qualify for special education services, but New York is much better about that. So, again, there's a lot of different options. I think that people have one view of what homeschooling looks like, and that is very much not the case. A lot of different people do it a lot of different ways. Again, there's people who are stay-at-home kind of moms and do it like that. There's people who are more like me who work with a group of people who are also working, more or less full time, some part time, and working and fitting our schedules together to make sure that we have the kids at a place where they need to be every day, and some learning and different activities take place. We have art, we have wilderness, things like that. And you can do it relatively inexpensively. So, again, just about being creative and kind of taking a step back, right? Like taking that red pill, right? Take
Uh-oh,
a step back.
The FBI's now you're in the FBI's list
Oh, I'm sorry.
of
Is that I
extremists.
had no idea. I didn't know that was a thing. I was
Are you
just trying to say, like,
No, I'm just being funny because there was literally an article that came out this weekend that said that people who the FBI is saying that that's an extremist term, saying the
oh,
red pill.
and I'm not even like one of those red pill kind of people, but I think that is particularly apt for this type of thing. Like, you really have to like take a step back and say, okay, like I've made my life in this certain type of way, and this is what I've known my whole life. This is and you have to say that's kind of a story that I've been told. And you can rewrite your own story. And again, it's small steps. Maybe you don't do it all at once, maybe it
Yeah.
starts just by over the summer doing something different.
Someone put this in the comments section, and I want to warn them because I get your opinion on this. They put, "I'm grateful that my niece is in a private school, so I know her mind is safe from all of the wild stuff." I'm sorry, but that's not true. Private schools could be just as woke as any public school.
Yeah, you have to be careful. It's everywhere. So I know a lot of the private and the independent schools, uh, less so the Catholic schools or the Christian schools, but again, you have to know what the curriculum are. You have to, especially when they're bringing in these outside
Mhm.
facilitators to some of their classes. Um, Even some of the technology, like be careful about how much technology they're giving your kids in schools, surveys, things like that. But yeah, there's no guarantee that just because your child is in a private school that they are
Uh,
safe. I know some of the first whistleblowers really on this stuff came out of private schools, Catholic
mhm.
private school. Okay, so they might be pretty safe. I mean, Catholics have their own problems.
Yeah, true. As a former Catholic myself, I could say yes, that's true.
So, and there's like not just they have religious problems, they have some other problems, so you got to be careful there. But
Mhm.
yeah, again, I would say the Catholic and Christian schools, parochial schools, the Jewish schools again depends on which ones. Like the
Yes.
more reform ones or the more
Yeah.
ritzy ones, like not so much.
No.
But the more you could say, like, I guess, like, the Hasidic ones or the
Mhm.
conservative ones, probably more safe.
Yeah, because
So
those I mean, sometimes the Reformed Jews are almost like Jews in name only.
oh my god, I grew up Reform.
I'm sorry, but
No, and
that's
it's
that's what I
true
hear
though,
from my
I go to
conservative
the
Jewish
Chabad,
friends.
though, I go to the Chabad now because well, the reason I started going was because they were the only place that didn't require cards or masks. So I started going November 2021, so like shortly after I got fired. And so that was like the heart of Delta, and I was like, I'm only going if I don't have to wear a mask or show a card. And I walked in and they welcomed us and they were like, and they were like, some people might choose to, some people might not choose to. It's fine. Like I was like, oh, these are my people.
I know. I just started going to a new church myself. It's been a couple, maybe like 2 months. I've been trying to find a new church, so I've settled so far in this one, and the pastor, yeah, yesterday because it was Monday, uh, he was talking about mask and. Literally he's down the pulpit talking about how the government's making you take a shot that doesn't even work, and I'm there cracking up, and I'm like, I mean, there's other things he said. He calls Joe Biden Poopy Pants Joe. I mean, he says some of the craziest things, and I'm like, I like this bastard.
That's
I'm
funny.
like, if you're a Democrat, you definitely don't feel comfortable at that church.
I mean, I guess they don't really sometimes at the dinner table get a little bit political. Like, so the thing that I love about the way that we do it on Shabbat service is like it'll be like a 20-minute or 30-minute service, and then it's like a dinner. So, and it's not like too many people. It's like maybe 20 people, like 15 people, sometimes a little bit more. And so like at dinner sometimes the conversation will get a little bit spicy. But
Mm.
Jews, the thing about Jews, and I really realized this during the Passover Seder, which we're still in Passover here. And so you go through the second I was there for the second night, and on the second night you're talking about leaving Egypt and about how it's about liberation, and really actually every day of your life is about like reliving that liberation, and a key part to liberation is asking questions. And so the whole thing is this ritual about getting the youngest kids among you to ask the questions. Why do we do things this way? Why do we do things that way? What's the point of this? What's the purpose of that? And so, and as a Jew, even though I was a reformed Jew, definitely one thing I had growing up around the table was just like, oh, lots of questions, always going back and forth, having different opinions. But then, like, when I was a kid, you didn't drink, but
Yeah.
just having a drink and just being like ha ha ha, like end of the night it's totally fine. And that's the other thing I love about Jews is that they have somebody whose job it is to specifically make sure that everybody's cup
Mhm.
is sufficiently full and to come
Well,
around and do shots.
well, it's funny that you talk about that with the questioning, because if you go, for the non-Jews and maybe people in with, because a lot of people in the Christian faith don't study the Old Testament, and I think that's wrong. I think if you got to study where you came from, and
Right.
you look at it like Abraham when he's there talking to God about Sodom and Gomorrah, and he's bargaining with God and questioning God, like, but what if there's 10 10 righteous people, 100 righteous people. He gets him down to, I think, what was it, is 10, right? Is it 10 he gets him down to?
Yeah, I mean, they all the big guys, all the big figures, and even the smaller ones, there's
Mhm.
always, like, some back and forth with God. There's always some questioning and some bargaining.
Yeah, no, I mean, and like I said, you got to go back to your roots, and that's why I love to read the Old Testament, and I go, where you look at that stuff and you go, yeah, wait a minute, could you imagine, here's the creator and you hear bargaining with the creator, like, that's just crazy, uh
Yeah.
so it's funny that you say that about the questioning, and it just clicked in my mind, thinking about that. Moses there talking with God, and he's like, why me? It's like,
Yeah, or no, but even too, like, Moses when and Aaron, right, when the Jews were outside of Israel and they were worshiping the idol worship
mhm,
over the calves, and
the
so then
calf, yeah, the golden
Moses
calf.
he goes back up to God, and God is like, "Oh, and Moses is like, "Hold on, hold on, hold on. Listen, the news of this great God has spread across the land. All right? So are you just going to sit here and tell your people, "Oh, just you know what? Forget that promise. Forget that covenant I made you." And it's like pretty genius. And again, it's like, "Whoa, like Moses, like this is God." And
Mhm.
Moses just so and yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot of that in the Old Testament and in the Jewish faith altogether for sure. And I just love the ceremonial aspect of it. And to me, it's like no surprise actually that even though Jews are a small population, because it's about being different, it, they're resilient and successful. It's like no surprise to me.
Well, it's kind of like what we were talking about off camera, because the thing about Jewish people, and like people get mad at this, and I never understand it, and they're like, because they stick together. I'm like, damn right they stick together.
Right.
People wanted to kill them
Like
for thousands of years. Why wouldn't they stick
right.
together?
Yeah, and which is why I sort of like it's like, for example, the black business thing, right?
Mhm.
I don't like when it's taken and it's commercialized and it seems like people are just jumping on the bandwagon. But like in theory, I'm not against it, right? I'm not against like a black person being like, "Oh, I want to support a black business."
Yeah.
Right? Because as a Jew, like if I know a Jew who has something, I'm going to support them first. And I think that again we were talking about this is like,
Mhm.
oh, they say New York City is the most segregated city, but I'm like, oh, people want to live with their people. Like,
Yeah.
what's wrong
It's
with
like if
that?
you wanna go and you wanna get, good Chinese food, you go to Chinatown or you go to now there's 2 Chinatowns because now you got one in Flushing and you got one in Manhattan.
Right, and there's Koreatown, there's um there's
You
Borough
could
Park, right? And
Yeah, you
then
could go into Brooklyn for Jewish food. I'm not It used to be my old neighborhood, the Lower East Side, but it's not so
that
much anymore.
transitioned to more like Chinatown. Chinatown just keeps
Yeah.
growing and growing.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if I want to get a good pastrami sandwich, I got to go to Katz and pay like $30.
Yeah, and then, over there a little bit, what's, why can't I think of it? Bay
What?
Ridge. Bay
Bay
Ridge.
Ridge, yes, Bay Ridge is
Yeah,
nice.
so, like, Bay Ridge has, like, the Italian section, and then
Hmm.
it has the, uh, Arab section, and
Hmm.
then it has, like, the Chinese section, so, I don't
Yeah.
know, I don't see that as a bad thing, especially if you're an immigrant population, like, you come in, and then you still have, like, your native language, and then hopefully you pick up the English language too. It just seems, again, like the natural way of things, and I
Oh
think
man.
for the most part, people are pretty good about getting along. Like, does it work perfectly? Does the government weaponize race to split people and take
Yeah.
power? For sure.
Oh yeah.
I'm black, but most of the time I live in a white community because we know we're safe. I mean, I
Yeah.
definitely know that's a thing that black people do. I mean, my son
Well,
is biracial. I tend to date people who are of a darker complexion, and, yeah, that's definitely a thing that black people do.
well, yeah, no, it's funny, but a black person can say that and it's perfectly fine. But if a white person actually makes that same statement, even though their friends told them the same thing. No, you're racist. And like, look, like I said, I'm from the Lower East Side. Now it's gentrified, but growing up, it was horrible. Crime was horrible. Drugs was out of control, and what was when I turned 18, I knew I didn't want to live in New York no more, and I'm glad
Right.
I made that choice because I couldn't afford to live in New York right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough call. It's a tough call to say what to do, um, in terms of because right now I think that a lot of black people are concentrated in urban areas. It's like what they do is they allow the crime to get out of control and drive it down, and then they sell it off at a bargain to the developers.
Hmm.
But for you to, like, stay there and try to, like, revitalize your community and this and that, it's quite expensive and it's hard, right? So,
Hmm.
do you do that or do you move out somewhere else and just try to come up there and either blend in, or maybe you find an up and coming Puerto Rican community down in Miami or something like that, or different communities that are up and coming that also kind of share your cultural or ethnic background. Um, I don't know. It's tough to say. I do think though that people should kind of think more about, oh, like safety is important, right? But I do think that people should think about, and this goes for anybody, not just people coming up, because you can run, but you can't hide. Not everything is
It's
racist.
racist. Yep.
You can
100%, Macy. 100%.
It's like, I just think from all of these things, you can run, but you can't hide. It's everywhere. So
Yeah.
wherever you are, you need to think about, is this community right for me? And organize your life around that. Like, they've got us so hooked to Netflix and sports, and like you come home and you like go in front of the TV and you watch it and whatever, and like what that's fine, but I don't think you should be doing that every night. Like, I think that the majority of nights, like how people used to do, they used to sit around with their community members. And, I think you should be going to town meetings. I think that you should be reading different bills online. I think that you should be meeting with your neighbors and just like having dinner with your neighbors. Like, I'm blessed. I live in a condo. And so, like, I do have dinner with my neighbors on a regular basis. So just things like that.
No, I agree. I think, you know, live where you're comfortable. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're black and living among white people living among black people. For me, being Puerto Rican, the only thing is I need access to my ingredients for food. That's it. As long as I can have my ingredients, that like when I lived in
All right, what's some
Texas,
special stuff that you have to have? Like, what kind of Puerto Rican food do you make?
well, it's just like the key basis of Puerto Rican food is what we call sofrito.
Okay.
And it's just like a seasoning we make where it's um not cilantro but uh culantro, which is a different leaf, so it has a different flavor than the cilantro. So we need that. We use sweet peppers, that's what it's called in English, sweet peppers, garlic, onions, uh bell peppers, like whichever ones you want. It just depends on person's preference. So those things are easy to find. But the first two that I said, culantro and sweet peppers, and not just any sweet peppers. There's these we call them ani dulce, which is sweet peppers, but it's not like commonly found because they almost look like habaneros.
Yeah.
They're like really small, but they're not spicy.
Okay.
So like I said, so that's the Puerto Rican that's like the base of all our dishes. So like if you have a Puerto Rican make rice and beans, the
Yes.
sofrito is going to be in the beans. If
Listen, I
you
I I hung out in the Bronx a little bit.
so you
I
know
know a thing or two. I know a thing or two.
creative minds said sazon, but you can find sazon everywhere.
Right. It's which is different. I have
Yeah.
Szechuan. I like my son likes that because it makes the rice orange.
Yes. But so like even if you make like so you lived in people from the Bronx. So you ever had a ajo con andule?
Maybe.
It's a yellow rice with like these black greenish
Yes.
beans. Okay.
Yes. I've
So they
had
put sofrito in that. If you had beef stew in a Puerto Rican house,
yes.
that's
I don't
sofrito. So sofrito is our base seasoning for like every dish we make.
okay. Gotta
So
have that. Gotta have
gotta
that.
have that.
Duly
So
noted.
so that's one thing. It's like, yeah, no, I could live anywhere as long as I have access to that, or if someone could send it to me, I'm good.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's
But
funny. This weekend, I was out in DC, and my best friend's girlfriend is Jewish, so she made us matzo ball soup. And since I'm from a Jewish neighbor, I live Lower East Side next to Jews. It's not the first time I've had it, but it's the first time my wife had it,
okay.
and she was like, "Oh my god, this is delicious."
She liked those balls, huh?
She liked those balls. She
Yeah.
had two.
Listen, it's not a complete meal, a complete Jewish meal unless you've had your matzo ball soup. It
Mhm.
literally every meal, every holiday, matzo ball soup.
Yeah, it was. She made it really flavorful. Like she even put like it had like a little bite to it. Like she put some, I think maybe some red pepper or something in it, and so I had like that little like after kick to it, and I was
Well,
like, "Ooh, this is really good."
listen, Jews could cook. We know a thing or two. We aight.
Yeah, like I said, I grew up around them. I grew up around like my best friends growing up were a pair of brothers called Nachum and Ari. So,
Yes.
and you can notice I get that Nachum right because I
Yes, you
practiced it
get
so
it.
many
Shout out to
times.
Tom and Ari. Shout out to them. Shout out to them.
Oh, I wish man, I wish Nachum moved to Israel. He became I think he's like an investment, but he studied to be a rabbi. So I don't
Mm.
know which one he's doing now,
I know
but
sometimes they get confused between the money and the religion. I know.
yeah. So
I'm
you
sorry,
know,
wait, that might have been like an anti-Jewish thing to say.
It's okay. You're Jewish. You're allowed to say
Oh,
it.
I'm allowed to. I forgot. Yes.
Unless, then they'll accuse me, like, they'll accuse me of being a self-hating Puerto Rican, and they'll accuse you of being a self-hating Jew.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's an honest, and it's something that might be said about any person of faith, right? I feel like
Mhm.
that's like a thing of my friend and I were talking about this actually with Easter and the way that Christianity has been captured in this very commercialized way. Because I'm
Oh
pretty
yeah.
sure that the Easter bunny and the Easter eggs, like that's like nothing to do with like Jesus rising, right?
Nope.
Yeah. So,
Well,
and then
no, it has to do with, which is crazy. Not only is it commercialized, but it's also paganized, because
right,
the whole thing with the Easter bunny has to do with Ishtar, who was like a fertility goddess of the ancient times.
right. And then, like Santa Claus and Christmas. So I feel
Oh
like
yeah.
you, you can make the same statement of any religion in the way that money or again, I don't think money itself is necessarily evil, but that desire, that need to go get money over
Well,
actually
it's kind of funny. It's like
God.
you said something. Yeah, I have that's my pet peeves with Catholicism, because I grew up Catholic. So that all these holidays that we have as Christians, other than the Jewish holidays, they're all built around paganism, and um, a way to get the pagans into the faith. And I know I may be stepping on some people's toes. People may not like to hear that, but
Right. Well, here's my yeah, so, like, that's kind of my big thing too is, like, why I don't think I would ever be able to convert to Christianity because I do feel like the way that it was developed, it was very utilized for a political purpose, right? It was at that time when Rome like needed to be consolidated into the
Mhm.
eastern and to the western, and so they use Christianity kind of as a tool to do that, and they created the calendar in a convenient way and moved certain
Mhm.
things around to align with the paganism in order to easily
Yeah,
convert
like
over.
Jesus's birthday is really, Jesus was born in, like, I believe, like, in October, uh not December, but they did, December 25th, instead of, when it's really supposed to be
Right.
around the winter
But here's
solstice.
the
And
thing, it's like, that's not to say that I have plenty of friends who are devout Christians or Catholics or Orthodox Christians, whatever.
Mhm.
That's not to say for me personally that that is not a path to worship God, to connect with
Oh
God,
yeah.
that
No, I
those
agree with that.
writings don't have any value. So, I know plenty of people who I have so many great conversations with, who I have a deep spiritual connection with, who are Christian. So, I think that both things can be true.
Oh, I agree. I look at it like this. I go, I recognize the faults of, my faith. I recognize, you know, uh, the paganism involved in getting people to convert to the religion. And but I think more people need to recognize that, just because, yes, you could be a good Christian and you could celebrate Easter and you could celebrate Christmas, but celebrate it in a that not the commercialistic way, but the proper way, so to speak. Like, where, you're praising the Lord for, uh, his sacrifice and his resurrection and his birth, and not make it about, the presents, or, like you said, Easter eggs and all that stuff. You know, take that stuff out of it. Like,
Right.
eh,
And it's
you
really tough, like, I don't know how you do that. So, I kinda, like, messed up this year, and I, like, just didn't do it, and my son, like, woke up and he was like, "Oh, it's Easter," and I was like, "Oh, yeah, it's Easter." And he was like, "Oh," like, looking around the house, I was like, "Well, you're not gonna find anything." He was like, "Why?" I was like, "Well, like, it's my fault, like, I didn't take out the basket, and you're supposed to, like, coordinate with the Easter bunny to, like, make your plans, and I didn't do that, so it's my fault." And so, but it's like, how for us, like we're Jewish, you know what I mean? Like to him,
Yeah.
Easter's just like basically some nonsense holiday. It doesn't really have anything to do with anything.
Uh-huh.
So like, is that fine? Like, is that okay? And just like when he's old enough to realize that it's nonsense, like just stop doing it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I've I've what's the word I'm looking for? I've thought about that myself about do I want my daughter to, believe in Santa Claus and give that lie to her? Like my wife does it, but I do it hesitantly because I really don't want her to think that Christmas is about Santa Claus. I want her to think it's about Jesus.
Right.
And so I'm just like, okay, we'll do it now because you know what? I don't want her to ruin it for other kids. So it's like, but it's like when she gets old enough, I don't want it to be a situation like how I found out Santa Claus was fake.
Right.
My uncle was drinking
Yes.
coffee with his beard off in the kitchen when I came around and saw him. That's how I found out Santa Claus didn't exist.
Devastating.
It's like you lied.
Yeah.
Uncle Larry's Santa Claus.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, in terms of, like, religion, I don't have that same predicament, because like, we have Hanukkah, and then Christmas is just, like, a Santa Claus thing, like, we don't talk about
It's
Jesus.
like, well, Hanukkah's better. You get 8 crazy nights.
Yes, yes, one present every night,
It's
exactly.
like that's better. I'd rather have the 8 presents than the one.
But yeah, like again, we do the Christmas thing. Like usually we end up because like Christmas is the day that we get off, like everybody has Christmas off.
Yeah.
So usually that's the day that we're able to get together with family. So we do something like for Hanukkah, like we might
Mhm.
do like a celebration with friends or family and we'll go to synagogue or whatever, we'll do it at our home, but, like, Christmas is really that day that everybody from all around gets together.
My favorite job was I worked at for a Jewish nonprofit, and the best thing about it was I got all the Jewish holidays and the Christian holidays working for them. I got Yom Kippur and Rosh
Yeah,
Hashanah and Christmas.
right, and then they have, like, a bunch of other random days too, like, they get a bunch off for Pesach,
Oh,
like,
well, they were kind of orthodox, so we used to call it Russia Friday
uh
because they used to let us out every Friday when the once the sun started setting late.
Oh, right, yes, yes,
So
yes.
they would let us out like at three
They gotta
o'clock.
get home, yes, they gotta get home to get ready for Shabbat, exactly.
Exactly.
Yup,
So, that was our joke. We used to call it Russia Friday.
that's funny,
Yeah,
that's
so it was
funny.
like that was the best job because it was like, and they still paid you even though they let you out
Listen,
early.
Jews are serious about, like, making sure that they like, get their worshiping for God. I'm actually really trying to do more, like, structure my day more, like, really, technically, you're supposed to pray 3 times a day, so
Mhm.
I'm really trying to do the one when I get up and trying to get the one in when I get to go to bed, and then, do one, like, when I eat as well, and then more if
It's funny. We went. My wife is off today, so we went out to have lunch. And the little one, my daughter tells my wife, "Why didn't we pray when we eat?" And it was like, uh, "Oh, oh man, she got us busted."
Yeah,
So I told her, you know what? We're gonna have to do that because if she
yep.
wants it, you know, out, it's like,
And I think you can just start doing it, right? It's not have to be like
yeah.
something weird. It can just be like, "Hey, we're gonna start doing this thing because it's really important to take a moment before you eat food to recognize where it comes from and why, and just be so grateful for that." We wore 9 clothes and had dinner together. Oh, nice clothes and had dinner together. All I remember was egg coloring, no egg hunts or Easter bunny.
Yeah, I never did any egg hunts growing up in New York City. I don't know if it's just a New York City thing that we didn't do it, and I don't know. I don't remember egg hunts.
my son, he goes, I was like, "Oh, you don't even need the candy. You don't need the candy." He goes, "Ma, I don't even do it for the candy. I'm in it for the hunt." I was like, "I don't know if that's like good thing, if that's creepy."
You know, it's just toxic masculinity
That's
coming out.
toxic masculinity. 7 years old. He's in it for the hunt. Watch out.
Uh, we go through some of these comments. I have a question: how many running a nonprofit organization without using the money? I don't get it. No, how the nonprofit works um, is that it's not that they're not allowed to make money. It's just that they're not allowed to make profit. So like you're supposed to run on your expenses. So like if you say it costs $500,000 to run a business, your nonprofit, then all you're allowed to do is make up to $500,000. You
Right.
can't.
Well, or you have, and then you have to expend all the rest on programs and things like that.
Yes.
Like any
Hmm.
donations you get in, it can only purely be to run your to cover your costs and to
Hmm.
pay for your programs, and then that's it. It's not like a business where you're trying to, make money for your shareholders or for
Exactly.
the business.
So yeah, so that's how the nonprofits are run. Um, sorry.
But you
Yeah.
should, so the thing about nonprofits though is sure there's a lot of nonprofits that are completely harmless, but there's a lot of times nonprofits are actually just used as a way um to push corporate interests. So they, for example, what they're doing here in Connecticut with the fair housing, affordable housing legislation is the developers have funded these nonprofit organizations that are like called, one of them's called like Desegregate Connecticut. And what they do is they go around and they do like grassroots organization, and they go and they get people in these communities and they're like, "Oh, you should fight for affordable housing and to desegregate Connecticut." And basically what happens is that they get these developers really sweet deals, and these developers can just go into a town and just be like, "We want to
Yep.
build here and we're going to provide affordable housing." But really when you look at the numbers, they don't really add up to
No,
that
it's like they
affordable.
built 100 units and like 10 units are for they put, for affordable housing so they could reach their quota of what they need to call themselves.
And it's like limited time periods. Like if you run the numbers and the time periods and like the quotas that the towns are supposed to get, the goals are not achievable, and it's just a big giveaway to developers at the
Oh
end of
yeah.
the day. And I think what the politicians think is that, if the developers come or build, the people will come. And then when the people come, they'll pay taxes, they'll broaden the tax base, and then they can fund more programs, right? So it's just a bunch of nonsense that's not really achieving the goal of affordable housing. Like, I don't
No.
even know if can government even achieve that goal? Like,
No,
it just
they can't because they don't know how to manage their own money. If they, that's why all these government that's why I don't know any government, city, local, federal, that doesn't run deficits.
right. I mean, sometimes they have surpluses for this or that, but the
Yeah,
thing
but the,
is, again, it's just because of money mismanagement, and they actually really, like we have they'll say we have a surplus, but at the same time we owe this and that, and we're the highest tax in the world. So I don't know how all the numbers work.
well, what it usually works is, let's say, they have all these different budgets for all these different programs. They're running deficits on one program, but then maybe run a surplus on the
Right.
other. But when you they cancel each other out.
Eh, it's just like, yeah, I think government has its hands in way too much. They're not really good at doing things. I mean, at the state level, I guess it could be different. You have to look at the state constitutions, but at the federal level, I really think that Congress should not be allowed to like outsource their lawmaking. So they can't be like, "Hey, EPA, you can now," they make regulations, but those regulations carry the weight of law.
Exactly.
I
Yep.
think that's illegal. I think that anything that carries the weight of the law has to run directly through Congress, because that's who I vote for. I can't vote for the faceless bureaucrat at the EPA or the CDC or whatever the millions of
Yep.
ABC alphabet soup things we have. So again, I don't know how it works at the state level. I think that state governments, they write their own constitutions,
Yeah.
and the way that regulation could work could be differently. I think that I'd like to look at that, because again, like, how can all these faceless people be making, in New York, for example, that crazy quarantine regulation that apparently they're trying to reboot again in a
Yeah.
slightly different form, not through the legislature, but through regulation. So,
Yeah, because what it is these legislatures, they're they're weak, they're lazy, and they're like, oh, let's just create this let's just create this organization, FDA, uh, Department of Education, and all that stuff, and go. We'll let them make the rules instead of having to pass them all the time. We need something
right.
new, and
And
then I mean, they do it with the budgets and everything. They put these monstrous bills all over the place with
omnibus packages.
omnibus bills where it's like 10,000 pages, and they tell someone here, we're gonna pass this tomorrow. What?
Right. And that's it's like, just like on its face, it's obviously illegal. I think
Hmm.
I forget which Federalist paper it is. Maybe 4, 10, 14. I feel like one of those. Yeah, basically it just talks about that if there's so many laws that one cannot know the laws, then there's no point. Like, that's not a republic,
Yeah.
because it there some could be conflicting, because the whole point is that you're supposed to be equal under the law, not equal outcome, not even equal opportunity. A lot of people get that confused. Equal opportunity is not is as bad as equal outcome, right? It's
Hmm.
equality under the law. We want to be treated equal under the law, because there's no such thing as equal opportunity. It's just never going to happen.
Oh, yep. No, I think that's a great place to end it. I think that you said it. Considering, I think we went full circle with that.
But hold on, I
Interesting.
don't want to end it there, because that kind of sounded, so this is the thing that
Okay, go
like,
ahead.
conservatives, we don't like that term, right? We can call it what you want. People on the right,
Yeah.
people who are hanging out with right Rican. So
Mhm.
we need to be better at showing how we do things that are bigger and better, and you get more, because that's what the left is really good at. They're really good at telling you how the government can give you more and do more things for you and give you more benefits. But
Mhm.
freedom, you always get more from freedom.
Mhm.
Freedom is always bigger and better, and you get more when you get to decide for
Mhm.
yourself. And
Exactly. And freedom is dangerous. People are want to be comfortable and safe. Freedom's, to say, freedom's dangerous, and there are going to be some stuff like, let's say I'm a 2A person. You know,
Well,
there's
hold on,
going to be
yes, freedom is dangerous, but you know what else is dangerous? Living
tyranny.
in a democratic city,
Oh, yeah. Well, that's
okay?
why I left.
So, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, you can say, what are we talking about dangerous? Because when you live in a community, right, that you invest in because you want things, that's what
Yeah.
you want. Everybody always acts like individuals are against the community. But for
Yeah.
me, an individual and a community, they work hand in hand, right? If you're going to have a free market system, almost nobody makes anything completely by themselves. You
No.
have to work interdependently with people, but each person contracting for themselves, right?
Mhm.
Out of their own free will. So I think that individual and collective are often put as things that are opposing, juxtaposed to one another, but I
Mhm.
actually think that they are part of the same thing. You can't have one without the other. However, you have to always base things on like the individual over the collective. Otherwise, you end up just killing innocent people for the
Yeah.
greater good. Um,
Yeah.
and then you have way less when the government uses its force than when you have the
Well,
freedom. So I wanted to end on that. Freedom is bigger, it's better, and you get more.
hey, look at the shelves of communist countries versus free market countries.
Right, and it's not perfect, right? But it's a
No, not
bent even just a little bent in the direction, right, of having more free options and free choices. It's even since the 1980s, I believe it's cut poverty by 40%, like, something ridiculous. Again, is it perfect? Is our world amazing? Like, has there been no tyranny or awful things going on? Are we definitely bending back in the wrong direction? Sure, yes. But again, freedom always is better. Boom,
excellent.
that's the end.
There you go. That's the end. Well, it was a pleasure having you on. I had a blast having this conversation, and um, if you haven't watched the show and you don't see how great her shows are and how she is, you have to give her a watch. I put her link tree, so your link tree has all your social media posts. Because you do a live stream on Rumble every
Yes.
Saturday.
Yeah, so, YouTube, Rumble, live stream Saturday night around 8:30 PM Eastern Standard Time, and then I try to drop, a video or 2 every week. Sometimes I have conversations with people, sometimes I'm just expounding all my wonderful knowledge, bestowing it upon the world in all its grace and beauty, if I might say so myself. But yeah, this was so much fun. I really appreciate you having me on.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks again, and everyone, check out Stephanie at Teaching Liberty. Have a good night, everyone.